Michael, I caught some of the live tweet. There were twists.
Oh yes, I am not okay after that episode, and not just because the show was cancelled. It's so strange watching it because so many people have now believe this was the best episode of the season. I might be one of them. And yes, where it even began, Courtney and Pat returned from the Helix Institute that they were in last week. And Courtney found out that Yolanda was staying in her house after her parents kicked them out. And there was this beautiful scene right off the bat where they saw each other in the house. And Courtney was like, Yolanda. And Yolanda was like, Courtney. And the two of them ran and had this like really emotional hug. And so Courtney apologized for not telling the JSA everything and said she's always here for Yolanda. I think that scene was really important because it set up that Courtney was now being honest and she'd learned from keeping secrets. But she also wanted the JSA's approval because she was finally going to tell Cameron everything about his father, about the JSA, all of it. And we didn't get to see it happen on screen, but we learned that later that Yolanda did give her approval. But that was not the obstacle because Courtney had to go to Rick and Beth and ask them for their approval. In the end, Rick said he will support her because he loves the JSA and they're his family, but don't say I didn't warn you because Rick hates Cameron. They hate each other. So he wasn't happy about that. Meanwhile, as all of this is happening, you remember Cameron's creepy grandparents? They also have the ice powers and they're trying to indoctrinate him into the life that his father led as well. It's more the grandmother. She is quite psycho, whereas the grandfather's starting to pull back a little bit. And you, because they talk to each other in different language, we see in the subtitles how far she's willing to go. And then the grandfather's like, chill out, love, and calm down. But Cameron's art teacher paid a visit to his house. It was like Cameron quit art class. Grandmother loved this because grandmother does not want him having any other passions other than the mission.
Let him draw, Grandma.
Exactly. The grandfather was a little concerned, but she saw he had drawn a picture of Courtney and was like, nope, he can't be doing this. His goal has to be towards the mission. And
Is he good at it?
He's excellent. He's a real artist. And she threw it in the bin.
Just checking.
She threw the picture in the bin, and we turned out later that the picture was a picture of Courtney. And as it lay in the bin, it started to freeze over because the grandmother had obviously frozen it. And again, the grandmother knows all about Courtney and the JSA. But Cameron's art teacher, Mr. Dysinger, showed up, and just for a bit of I know your face, he was played by the actor who also played Mr. Clark in Stranger Things, the boys' teacher. So he's good with teacher roles. But as soon as he turned up to their house, the grandmother was like, how dare you? It's good that you've no idea what we've been through. And he's like, I'm just concerned for Cameron. And again, the grandparents started arguing in different language. So the teacher was just sitting there like watching the two of them argue, having with no clue what they were saying. And the grandfather was like, Lily, calm down. He only cares about our grandson. And she was like, I've had enough of this. And she literally turned around and shot an icicle right into the teacher. And he died. That poor man went through hell with Eclipso last season, and Courtney saved him, and now it was all for nothing because he died this season.
Oh my God.
And then you get this really cold shot later when Courtney goes over to the McCant household and goes in through the door, and as Cameron lets her in, it pans across to the bin, and in the bin you see Mr. Dysinger's walking stick. So the grandparents they've taken real care of this. Clearly they know how to get rid of a body. So as all this was happening, Rick and Beth decide to track where the cameras that were watching everyone, they decided to track where it was coming from. But the problem was it was bouncing all over different locations. They found out that there was one in a bunker in Utah, so they sent Starman to look at it. Clever excuse not to have Joel McHale in this episode because obviously he wasn't contracted for every episode of the season. So he was off looking in Utah, but it was a dead end. Meanwhile, Rick and Beth were looking at different locations in town, and just as Courtney had went to the McKent household, they found out that apparently one of the sources of the feeds was coming from the McKent household. Now, Rick, who's having a hard time with the hourglass and experiencing what we think is going to be addiction problems with the hourglass, he got really angry about this and was like, see, I told them Courtney was wrong. She should have trusted us all along. So he's gone off the deep end. Meanwhile, Courtney goes to Cameron's house, says, we need to talk. And when she tells them his father was not who he thought he was, the grandma comes barging, how dare you? And then, but so she tries to freeze Courtney, and the grandfather's like, Lily, calm down again. And Cameron's like, all in the middle of this, like, what's happening, because he has no clue what's going on. And just as this happened, Rick burst through the back wall in his Iron Man outfit. It was like, I warned you. And then the grandmother stands up and was like, Cameron, they killed your father. So
no.
it all went to hell. And Cameron then started like using his ice powers towards Rick, and Courtney was like, Cameron, stop, that's Rick. And then he was like, Rick, and Cameron hits Rick. So the two of them started fighting in the living room. And the grandfather tried to get the grandmother out of the room because she was making things a hell of a lot worse. But then the grandmother ran into Yolanda, Wildcat, in the hallway. And before they could even have a conversation, Grandma was out there shooting icicles in the hallway. So Wildcat was bouncing around the hallway trying to get away from it. Meanwhile, Beth, who cannot fight, they left her in the garden because she's the like brains of the operation. They were like, you're not a fighter, stay out of this. But she didn't want to do that. So she ran in, and just as she ran in, her father told her that they'd unlocked part of the Dr. Midnight costume that she was wearing, and that it actually has a combat mode. So she wasn't using it to its full perfection. And then, of course, she ran into the grandfather in the hallway, and the two of them started fighting, which I didn't really get, because grandfather was like trying to cool things down, not literally with his ice powers.
He wanted to scrap though.
Yeah, but he did. And then the two of them, Beth, who could not fight, was sitting having a fight with the grandfather in the hallway. But thankfully, the Dr. Midnight goggles started saying, dodge, punch, right hook, left hook. So she was able to fight with the grandfather in the hallway. But he did get the better of her right as things were about to go bad. Artemis Croc, who is, remember Sportsmaster and Tigress, or Lawrence and Paula, the Crocs, who are trying to be better. They both had a special moment in the episode. Lawrence had a special moment with Pat, and Paula had a special moment with Barbara. And I think that clearly highlighted they've come so far. They're no longer enemies. And because those moments happened earlier in the episode, their child Artemis, who was being trained by the ISA, jumped in to help defend the JSA in this situation. So the Crocs are no longer a threat. And she came in, it was like, back off, Grandpa, and started battering him with her baseball bat. And so he backed off, and she helped Beth get up. So the JSA now has a new member. I have to say, I've said before, Stargirl's fight sequences are beautiful, and we got to see a fight in a hallway, we got to see a fight in a living room, we got to see a fight in another hallway. Gotta say, the camera work, the choreography, exquisite. And it all built up to the final moment. Grandpa was walking around the hallway holding his arm because Artemis had hit him with the baseball bat in his arm, so he could only shoot out his icicles with one hand. But my goodness, was Grandma was holding her own against Wildcat. She literally nearly killed Yolanda with ease. But the main event was, of course, Rick versus Cameron in the living room. And because Rick's powers were making him so like blinded by rage, Courtney was grabbing him, saying, Rick, stop it. And she didn't have her staff. So she was like, Rick, stop it. And Rick actually shoved Courtney off and hit her against the wall. And I think she hit her head then, because it was bloody after that. And this sent Cameron into a huge rage because he cares a great deal about Courtney. So the two of them really, really fought. But in the end, Cameron won out. Shockingly, Cameron won out because he's not a fighter. But he destroyed Rick, sent him into like the staircase in the room, and like Rick was lying there in a bloody mess in front of it. And that was the moment that Grandma announced that they killed your father. And Courtney was like, Cameron, don't do it. So she was like, Cameron, finish the job. And Cameron got his icicle ready to shoot through Rick. And then Grandpa came in. It was like, Cameron, we need to stop the cycle of violence. You have to stop this. So he did. But right as this was happening, it turns out that the pain in Grandpa's arm was not because he got hit by a baseball bat. He started having a heart attack right in the living room. And in a huge pivotal moment, Beth realized that her Dr. Midnight outfit also had defibrillators in the gloves.
I don't mean to laugh, but like, of course.
Of course. But it sounds ridiculous, but the most important part of it was that the JSA were able to save Grandpa Icicle. She used them, it worked. And even Grandma, who was in a fit of rage, was sitting there holding Cameron's hand, and they were all worried about Grandpa. And it worked. They saved Grandpa. The fighting had stopped. So I don't know where we go from here, but every relationship on the show is in shambles right now. We don't know what is going to happen next. And it very much ended with this like look between Cameron and Courtney as the two of them just looked at each other. And Rick was still sitting there in the staircase like, Courtney, I'm sorry. So right now the JSA is in shambles, but also we don't know where the relationship between Courtney and Cameron stands. We do know that Cameron still doesn't know the whole truth, and in the promo for next week he is like, Courtney, who killed my father? And so it looks like he may not be going down the villain route, but it definitely looks like he wants revenge on whoever killed his father. And that's going to be awkward because, of course, we know the answer was Courtney's little brother, Mike, because in season 1, he drove his car right through Icicle when Icicle turned into his ice sculpture ship. Mike drove the car right through it and shattered him into thousands of pieces. So how is this conflict going to pan out? And speaking of Mike, the official ending of the episode, so him and his best friend Shaquem decided that instead of getting the glory for figuring out who killed the gambler, they were instead going to do the right thing and find Cindy, because Cindy needed help. Everyone's turned their back on Cindy, and they won't do the same thing. They need to help Cindy. And they broke into her locker. They used the Thunderbolt pen, which can grant this specific wish. You have to be very specific about it. And they were specific about it. It opened her locker, and they broke into it, and they found a list of locations for all of Dragon King's labs. And they knew about that because Starman had also been to them. However, there was one that wasn't stroked off the list. So they're like, clearly Cindy is in this location. And they went there in the closing moments of the episode. It was a farm. It was so dark, and they had to use the Thunderbolt pen to illuminate the environment. And when they got there, they were like, looks like nobody's home, but the house pans down and you can see a body in the house. And so they went out to the farmhouse, and when they made it in there, they were like, there's nothing here. There's no Cindy. Why are we doing this for a girl who's about to turn into a crocodile? There's no one here. Why are we doing this? And then they heard a noise, and they turned around, and they were confronted by this gigantic humanoid ape that roared in their faces, and they all screamed. The Thunderbolt pen screamed as well, and they got out of there. And then the ape said something like, everyone must die.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the end of the episode.
Intense.
So it was a huge episode. But I believe, according to my knowledge and what fans are deducing, everyone thinks the creature is the Ultra Humanite, which, fun bit of information, was actually the very first DC comic supervillain created in 1939. He's an adversary of Superman, and he's an incredibly smart ape. And I know in the comics and the animated shows, he's had a rivalry with Gorilla Grodd, who obviously appeared on The Flash, who's a really smart ape. But this guy is white, a white ape, and he literally, by the looks of things, might have been who killed the gambler. We don't know yet, but we do know that Starman was assaulted by something that is giant and monstrous. And we know that the gambler was assaulted by something that is giant and monstrous. The only thing I will say is that this creature seemed to have, from what we know so far, has been set on people and set on things by someone who was watching them on the cameras. So I do think there is a greater mastermind at play here, but we have found out who the henchman, so to speak, is, that has been doing the actual killing. So yes, that was a big shock. We had all these like theories for who it would be. We did not expect it to be the Ultra Humanite of all people. And I'm excited to see where it goes next. I do feel like Cindy will come back into play because they did not find her. And that's the big, that was the big hook on the episode. But also we'll find out how the Cameron story plays into it. I feel like I did just describe the episode there in great detail, and it still feels like there's so much to describe. I'm not getting into it now, but I'm so excited to see where it goes. And it was so hard to watch such a good episode knowing that the show was going to end now. That I've never watched Stargirl like that before. It was such a unique kind of position to be in. But I do have faith. There is still about 5 more episodes left, and I do have faith that they will wrap it up well. It's just a shame that they have to wrap it up at all, because this season is shaping up to be the best yet, and I cannot wait to see where it goes with the potential Ultra Humanite, with Cindy, and perhaps most of all with the Cameron and Courtney dynamic. Yeah, what an episode. Probably my favorite of the season so far.
It sounded amazing and intense.
And unexpected.
And unexpected, right? Full twists. And a battle sequence, through your description, was like stellar and sounds like one of the best things that they've done. Not that the CW doesn't have great fight sequences, but like that sounded amazing.
Yeah, it really was. And I think that's the thing. The show had that when it was a DC Universe show, and people were worried when it went to CW that it would lose that quality. It never did. It still feels like a streaming show. It doesn't really work on network TV, but it does. And it's just it's such a high quality show. And even this late in the game continues to produce incredibly high quality episodes. And I know that's going to make me miss it more when it goes.
True. CW has made another mistake.
Yes.
And they're prepared to make more, but we'll see.